Hi there, I'm Anselma. I found out my dad left $2 million to my sister in his will, and I got nothing. No explanation, no warning, just erased. But the truth? That was just the beginning. They drained my bank accounts, used my name for loans, spread lies behind my back, and when I finally stood up for myself, they said I was the problem. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a pattern, one that had been building quietly for years. What would you do if the people who raised you turned you into a stranger in your own story? Would you stay quiet, or would you fight back? Let's talk about it. The paper didn't even look important at first, just another envelope in a messy pile of tax forms, warranties, and junk mail. I'd come over to help my dad sort through it all, like I always did every October. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon in Fort Collins, the kind of day that makes the trees look like they're on fire with gold and rust. My parents' house, warm and cluttered with memories, smelled like old candles and cinnamon. Familiar, harmless. I wasn't expecting to be blindsided. While I was flipping through the stack, looking for property tax documents, I saw the title, Last Will and Testament. For a moment, I froze, because wills aren't something you just stumble across like takeout menus. I opened it without thinking, curiosity outweighing etiquette. It took 3 lines to stop my breath. Everything, every last dollar, every inch of the house, every piece of my parents' assets was going to Verlies. Not one word about me, not a single acknowledgement of the years I helped them pay that mortgage when Dad's back went out, or the groceries I delivered after Mom's surgery, or the late-night phone calls I answered, walking them through online banking. Nothing. I kept reading, thinking maybe I missed a page. There had to be a mention, some token of appreciation, but no, just a single generic sentence near the end. We leave this with equal love for both our daughters. Equal love? I felt like a damn fool. I set the will aside without reacting. Dad came back into the room a few minutes later, sipping from his mug, and asked, "Find the tax doc?" "Not yet," I said, smiling so tight it felt like my face might crack. It wasn't the moment to blow up. I needed to process this quietly first. And maybe part of me still hoped there was a reasonable explanation. A mistake. Something that would make sense when I wasn't sitting there with betrayal tangled around my ribs like barbed wire. But 2 days later, the second blow landed. My phone rang while I was reviewing a client's retirement plan at the office. It was Mom. "Hi, honey," she cooed. "Listen, we've hit a little snag this month. Would you be able to send us $1,500 just to cover the utility bills and a couple other things?" I hesitated for all of 2 seconds before saying, "Yeah, of course." I transferred the money during my lunch break. It wasn't unusual. They'd asked before and I always came through. But that night, while I was half watching a crime doc on Netflix and scrolling through Instagram, I saw Verlies' story. She was at La Mer, that overpriced spa up near Boulder. Robes, wine, massage oils, soft lighting, and the caption, "Self-care is the best care pre-holiday reset." My stomach turned. I tapped through more photos. Sushi, champagne, candles. So that's where the utility bills went. At first, I told myself I must be wrong. Coincidence, timing. But I knew better. I knew what this was. They weren't just ignoring me, they were using me. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I sat with it. I sat with the weight of what I now understood. That I was the reliable one, the useful one, not the loved one. That night I drove home in silence. The sky was already dark by 6, and the cold was starting to bite through my coat. Inside my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and curled up on the couch. Across from me, on the bookshelf, was a photo of me and Verlies as kids, matching dresses, arms around each other. The glass frame had a tiny crack in the top corner. I'd meant to fix it. Now I just stared at it, and for the first time, I let myself feel it. This wasn't about money. It never was. This was about being erased. It had been 3 days since I read the will, since the spa photos, since the reality hit like a slap in the face. I hadn't said anything to anyone, not a single word to my parents, not even to Verlies. I went to work. I smiled at clients. I returned emails. I even laughed when my coworker Trina made some joke about her chaotic Thanksgiving plans. But every laugh, every smile, every nod, it was all muscle memory. Inside, I was unraveling in silence. It was a rainy Wednesday evening when my father called. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, still in my work clothes, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea I'd forgotten about. The window beside me blurred with soft droplets, and the light in my room was dim, muted, like the rest of me. "Hi, Dad," I answered, my voice more flat than I intended. He didn't ask how I was. No chit-chat. He got right to it. "About what you saw last weekend." His voice was too even, too rehearsed. "It's more complicated than you think." I didn't respond. I waited. "Your mother and we thought it was best. Verlies, she's had a harder time. You've always been strong. Independent?" There it was, the narrative, the same old script. "You're stable," he continued. "She's not. You don't need it like she does." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. My jaw locked so hard it hurt. I closed my eyes and felt a thud behind them, the ache of restraint. "That's your justification?" I asked, voice calm, too calm. "It's not about love, Anselma. You know we love you." I almost laughed, but it would have come out wrong, too bitter, too broken. "We're done here," I said softly, and hung up. I didn't cry, I didn't throw the phone. I just sat there letting the words settle in like wet cement. Not needed. Not deserving. Not included. I'd been demoted from daughter to utility. Reliable, silent, and ultimately replaceable. Later that night, I pulled out an old shoebox from my closet. Inside were scrapbooks and birthday cards, old letters, silly notes from middle school. I flipped through the pages slowly, my fingers tracing the edges of memories that now felt artificial. One photo stood out. Verlies crying after losing a 6th grade spelling bee. I remembered that day. I'd placed second. Dad had told me to let her win, just this once. She was sensitive, and I was mature enough to understand. I had nodded. I always nodded. In high school, I got into the state honors program. At the celebration dinner, all the attention went to Verlies getting a C+ in Algebra 2. "She worked so hard," Mom gushed. No one even mentioned my name. And still, I believed I was lucky to be seen as the strong one. I wore that label like a medal, thinking it meant they respected me. Turns out it meant they felt they could take me for granted. The next evening, just as I was making dinner, my phone buzzed with a call from Claire, my cousin. She rarely called. We mostly exchanged birthday texts and heart reacts on Facebook posts. I answered with polite curiosity. "Hey," she said hesitantly. "I was just checking in. Heard things got weird at your parents' house." "Weird?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yeah, well, my mom mentioned something about the will. I didn't want to pry, but Uncle Cadrian always used to say you were doing fine on your own. That Verlisa needed more help." I paused, spatula still in hand. "So he's been saying that for a while, huh?" Claire exhaled slowly. "Honestly? Yeah, I think they meant well, but—" There was no but that would fix it. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd deliberately chosen not to include me. They weren't confused. They weren't misguided. They agreed. I finished cooking, plated the pasta, and left it on the counter. I didn't eat. I wasn't hungry anymore. That night, I stood in front of the gallery wall in my hallway, the one with a dozen framed photos of family vacations, birthdays, holidays. I stared at the picture of my parents and me at Niagara Falls. Then I took it down. One by one, I removed every photo that had their faces in it. I didn't burn them. I didn't shred them. I just put them in a box and slid it under my bed. I wanted space. I wanted air. I wanted something that didn't echo their voices every time I looked at it. I picked up my journal. The pages smelled faintly of lavender from a sachet I tucked between them months ago. I opened to a clean page and wrote, "What do you call a family that never actually saw you?" A week passed, but nothing really changed. At least, not on the outside. I still went to work. I still replied to emails. I still smiled at the receptionist in the elevator. But I felt like a guest in my own body, like someone else had stepped into my skin and forgotten how to move around in it. It was a Sunday morning when I opened Instagram out of habit. I was sipping coffee by the window, watching the sun push through the clouds without warming anything, bright but cold, like a spotlight on something I didn't want to see. Verlice had posted a new photo. Throwback with my rock, my everything, dad goals. It was her and my father, arm in arm, both smiling in front of the lake near Estes Park. The colors had been filtered, softened, like some perfect Hallmark moment. But something felt off. It took me a second, and then I saw it. There was space behind Dad's shoulder, an awkward crop on the left side of the image. A strange floating edge of light that didn't belong. I knew that photo. I had it too. I pulled out my old backup drive and connected it to my laptop. The folder labeled Family Photos hadn't been touched in months. When I found the original file, I clicked it open. There I was, standing on the other side of Dad, smiling like I belonged. The original photo had 3 people. The one she posted had 2. They'd cut me out, not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally, cropped, removed, erased. I stared at the screen, hands frozen on the keyboard, coffee cooling beside me. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at the difference between truth and narrative. And then I laughed. A low, stunned laugh that didn't reach my chest. Later that day, I opened a different folder. Milestones. Graduation, promotions, birthdays. I scanned through the images, looking for patterns I'd never noticed before. And I saw them. Dozens of them. Photos where I stood just out of frame, where eyes looked past me, where conversations swirled around me like I was decoration, not blood. I remembered my college graduation, how I'd won a full ride to an Ivy League, and how at the family dinner, all anyone talked about was Verlice landing her first job interview. Not the job, the interview. "You're the strong one," Mom had said that night. "You don't need the spotlight. You shine on your own." At the time it felt like love. Now it sounded like dismissal. Like she was saying, "Don't expect anything. You already give too much." I opened a drawer and found one of the photo albums from when we were kids. Inside, a picture of the 4 of us at the Grand Canyon. Everyone smiling. But now I noticed, Dad's arm was around Verlice, not me. Mom's hand rested on her shoulder. I stood next to them, smiling just the same, but not touched, not claimed. Maybe it had always been this way. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. By late afternoon, the sun had dipped lower behind the apartment buildings, and I sat at my desk, flipping through those photos over and over, looking for something I'd missed, hoping for one image where I felt chosen. I didn't find one. Instead, I opened my email, not to send anything, just to type. Subject: when you erased me. I stared at the blinking cursor for several minutes before I started writing. I didn't know if I'd ever send it. That didn't matter. I just needed the words to exist somewhere outside my body, because now I knew they weren't just choosing her. They were rewriting a family without me in it. Wednesday came with drizzle and bone-deep cold. I wrapped my scarf tighter as I walked through the parking structure and into my office building. Our floor smelled like burnt coffee and fluorescent lights. I liked the routine here. Numbers didn't play favorites, forecasts didn't pretend, spreadsheets didn't crop you out of memories. I was halfway through reviewing a client's portfolio, 2 monitors glowing in front of me, my attention zoned in, when the internal line rang. I rarely got calls on that one. I paused, pressed the speaker button. "Anselma?" It was Lainey at reception. Her voice trembled. "Your family's here. They say it's urgent." I sat still for a beat, the word family rattling in my ribs. "Did they say why?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "They wouldn't say, but they won't leave." My hand hovered over the mouse for a moment. Then I stood. "I'll come down." As I descended in the elevator, my reflection in the mirrored walls looked calm, unbothered. But inside, my stomach curled into knots. They weren't supposed to come here. This was my space. Professional, clean, untouched by the mess I'd left in my personal life. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and there they were. Dad, arms crossed, face tight with expectation. Mom in her familiar beige coat and faux sympathetic smile. And Verlice, of course. Perfect hair, perfect posture, eyes scanning the room like she was the guest of honor. They stood in a line, like some kind of intervention. I approached slowly. They turned in unison. "You can't ignore us forever," Dad said first, skipping any pretense of affection. Mom's voice was soft, like she was trying to soothe a wild animal. "Sweetheart, we just want to talk. Don't make this bigger than it is." I took a breath, steady but low. "You already made it bigger," I said, eyes locked on her. "When you decided I wasn't your daughter anymore." There was a flicker behind her eyes. Discomfort? Guilt? Hard to say. She adjusted her scarf and looked at Dad, who didn't flinch. "You're being dramatic," Verlies finally chimed in. "It's just a will. You act like it's some kind of betrayal." I laughed, sharp, humorless. "You don't get to rewrite the narrative just because you're comfortable in it." "I didn't ask for anything," she muttered. "No," I replied. "You just took it when it was offered." I turned and walked away, not giving them the drama they came for. Back at my desk, I closed the blinds, sat down, and tried to pretend it was just another afternoon. I managed maybe 10 minutes of focus before the alert pinged on my phone. "Your account ending in **38 has been debited $2,500. My breath caught. I opened the banking app, heart racing. The transaction came from the joint account I had set up for Mom years ago, back when she struggled to manage her medical bills. I'd forgotten it even existed. I scrolled. It was a wire transfer to an upscale event venue. I called the bank immediately. The customer service rep was kind, but the response was clinical. "Unfortunately, since she's a legal co-holder, the transaction is authorized." I hung up slowly, my hands cold despite the heat in the room. That money wasn't just stolen, it was assumed. Taken like it still belonged to them. They'd shown up in my workplace, demanded a conversation, and then, behind my back, reached into my pocket. I opened the group chat we hadn't used in half a year. Their names stared back at me in the top bar: Kadrian, Sorrel, Verlies. I typed slowly, deliberately. "This is the last time you take anything from me without my consent," and I hit send. 2 days later, I was in the kitchen making tea when my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code, but not familiar. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was spam, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Is this Anselma Elmore?" "Yes, speaking." "This is Samantha from Equifax Fraud and Identity Services. We're calling to verify a recent co-signature on a personal line of credit, $12,000, issued last week under your name." The words barely registered at first. Then they hit. "I didn't co-sign anything," I said. A brief pause, followed by quiet typing on the other end. "The application listed your full name and an older residential address. The secondary signer is Sorrel Elmore." My grip tightened on the counter. Steam rose steadily from the kettle behind me. "That's my mother." "I see," she replied, her tone shifting. "So you're not authorizing this transaction?" "No, absolutely not. That's identity fraud." "We'll open an investigation and email you the formal dispute documents," she said. "But please note, because the signer is a known relative and may have had access to previous records, this could be a lengthy process." "Understood," I muttered, already feeling the ground tilt beneath me. I ended the call and just sat down, staring at nothing. 5 full minutes passed before I could even move. The betrayal didn't just sting, it stunned. She hadn't just stepped over a line, she'd crushed it. No text this time, no carefully worded message. I called her. My hands were shaking slightly as the phone rang. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice was soft, light, like she'd been waiting for me. "Sweetheart," she said, like nothing had happened. "I thought you might call." "You used my name to apply for a loan," I said evenly. "You didn't just cross a line. You buried it." She sighed, but didn't deny it. "We needed it. Things are tight right now, and you wouldn't have said yes." "No, I wouldn't have," I snapped, "because it's my name, my credit, my identity. You forged it." "It's not forgery, it's family. Families help each other." "No, families ask, families respect, they don't steal." And I hung up. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just sat there alone in my kitchen, letting the silence harden around me. If I'd had any illusions left, they ended there. An hour later, my phone lit up again. A text from Verlies. "You're seriously doing all this over a will? Grow up." Then a group message from Mom. "We've done so much for you. This is how you repay us?" No message from Dad, just a reaction on her text. Of course, no guilt, no shame, just deflection. They weren't hiding anymore. They saw themselves as victims. I was the villain for pushing back, for setting limits, for finally saying no. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened Facebook. My page had been quiet for years. Some old work photos, the occasional birthday post, a few likes here and there. But that night, I wrote something real. No accusations, no drama, just facts. For years I gave to my family. I paid for things, kept quiet, and told myself it was love. I ignored the imbalance. I convinced myself that loyalty meant silence. Recently, I found out I was removed from the family will, without discussion or explanation, just gone. Then I discovered a loan taken out in my name, without my permission, co-signed by someone I trusted. I've stayed quiet long enough. They haven't. So here's where I stand. I wasn't just written out of the will, I was written out of the family long before. And I hit post. No name-calling, no revenge, just truth. I didn't check for likes, didn't scroll to see who saw it. That wasn't the point. The point was, I had spoken. Let the truth breathe. Let it live where silence used to be. I was at work early that day. The coffee was burnt, my eyes were heavy, and for once my mind was quiet. Not peaceful, just suspended. I hadn't posted anything since the Facebook fallout. No response from Dad. Verlisa vanished. But the silence didn't feel like a break. It felt like pressure, like something was winding up behind the scenes. Around midday, an email popped into my inbox. Reception. You have a letter, hand-delivered, from the law offices of Henry and Clark, signed and sealed. I froze. My chest tightened. I left my desk and headed downstairs. Lainey handed me the envelope with a cautious look, the kind you give someone when you know it's bad but can't say so out loud. The letterhead told me everything. Back at my desk, I sat down, stared at the thick envelope for a second, then opened it. 3 pages. Heavy, glossy paper. The tone was cold, precise. You are being formally warned against sharing private family information with malicious intent on public platforms. The client? Sorrel Elmore, my mother. I read that line again. She hadn't called, hadn't written. No apology, no explanation, just lawyers. Threats, paper over pain. She wasn't trying to speak to me. She wanted to silence me. They weren't negotiating. They were drawing a line. I read the entire thing, slowly, twice. I didn't flinch. I just pulled out the office scanner, fed in the pages, and saved the files in a folder labeled Defense. No reply, no panic, just evidence. That night, I sat by the window with a glass of water. Snow was falling hard now, dancing under the orange glow of the street lamps. The city felt distant, wrapped in hush. I was drained, but sharp. The fog was gone. Then my phone lit up. A message from Nina, an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in months. Hey, did you actually say those things about your mom on that call? My stomach dropped. What call? I texted back. She replied with an audio file. I hesitated, then hit play. My voice, but wrong, off. Clipped sentences, choppy edits. The rhythm was weird, the tone mismatched. A manipulative liar who doesn't deserve the title of mother. I never said that, ever. The call was a Frankenstein version of something real. Our last conversation. Chopped up and rearranged. It was me, but not me. Someone had stitched together a character assassination. I messaged her back immediately. That's fake, badly edited. I have the full call saved, start to finish. Nina didn't answer right away. I could picture her staring at her phone, caught between what she heard and what she knew. That's what they were counting on. Doubt. Confusion. They didn't need to prove I was a liar. Just enough to make me look unstable. I pulled up the files. Audio backups of everything. The full call with Mom. The one with Verlise. I had them all. Documented, date-stamped, saved for reasons just like this. In the quiet, I opened a new doc and started writing a timeline. From the will, to the account transfers, to the gaslighting, to this. Every twist, every threat, every trap. I added receipts, screenshots, dates. I opened folders, labeled everything, cross-referenced timestamps, built the scaffolding of a truth they didn't want seen. Outside, the snow had coated the fire escape, thick and undisturbed. They thought sending lawyers would scare me. They thought splicing my voice would break me. They were wrong. I wasn't going to panic. I wasn't going to yell into the void. I was going to build a case. They called me dangerous for telling the truth. Wait until they saw what I could do with proof. My apartment windows were fogged from the inside, blurred by the condensation that came from days of refusing to open them. The radiator hummed, but the chill had settled beneath my skin and into the soft tissue of my patience. It was the kind of cold that didn't just touch you, it stayed. I was stirring oatmeal mindlessly when I saw the notification pop up on my phone. A neighbor I barely knew had sent a screenshot. No caption, just the image. Fort Collins Family Circle public post. When a daughter turns on her own mother for a few dollars, shameful. My stomach didn't drop, it locked. The first comment? Mrs. Kenna, one of Mom's longtime church friends. She'd braided my hair for a bake sale when I was 9. I raised 3 girls. None of them would ever disrespect me like that. Prayers to Sorrel. And then, the one that should have surprised me, but still felt like a slap. Verlice. No matter what, I'll always choose love over greed. I froze mid-bite. The oatmeal turned cold in my bowl. It wasn't just the words that hit, it was what came after, or rather, what didn't. The people who had quietly liked my Facebook post 2 weeks ago, the ones who'd messaged me in private, who said they understood, none of them showed up now. Not one public defense, not one counter-comment. Their silence buzzed louder than any insult. By afternoon, the group chat with the family had once again lit up. This time, it wasn't passive-aggressive. It was direct. From Dad, "If you really loved us, you'd stop airing our business. You're not being a daughter, you're being a problem." A problem, like I was mold on a wall, a leak under the sink, an inconvenience to be patched over and repainted. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I let out a laugh, dry, hollow, as if it came from somewhere else in the room and not my own body. And then I reached for my journal, the one I hadn't touched in 3 days, and wrote the clearest line I'd ever penned. I wasn't being a daughter, I was being a donor, not family, just function. That evening, as I was organizing receipts, Claire called. Her voice was hushed, like she wasn't supposed to be making the call, like the truth itself needed to be whispered. "And Selma, I need to tell you something. I should have said it earlier." I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear like it might burn. "Your mom knew about the will, from the beginning. She told the family it was for the best, that you wouldn't understand." The room fell quiet. Even my heartbeat seemed to step aside. "She told everyone not to bring it up with you, said it would only cause trouble." I didn't ask for proof. I didn't doubt her. I didn't need to. Because I'd always suspected that Mom stood in the hallway between betrayal and protection, that she might have been manipulated. But this? She wasn't caught in the crossfire. She was holding the rifle. I thanked Claire. I don't remember the tone of my voice, but I do remember hanging up and sitting there, still, my hands folded in my lap like I was waiting for something, judgment perhaps, or maybe the sudden weightlessness that comes when a foundation completely collapses. But no such freedom arrived. Later that week, on my way home from work, I stopped by the Safeway to pick up a few things. The air outside was sharp with wind, snowflakes dancing sideways under the parking lot lights. That's when I saw her, Verlice, standing next to the flower stand, holding her phone like it was an award. She glanced up, saw me, and smirked. "So," she said, brushing snow from her shoulder, "how's your little pity parade going?" There was no audience here, no church members, no family friends. Just her, just me. She waited for me to snap, to defend, to make a scene. But I didn't. I stepped closer, met her eyes, and said calmly, "You may have their will, but I have their truth, and I'm about to make it public." Her smirk wavered, just a twitch, but enough for me. I walked inside without another glance. She didn't follow. I picked up a carton of milk, paid in cash, and stepped back into the cold. The wind stung my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. They had tried to bury me. But they'd forgotten something important. I'd grown roots in concrete. 2 mornings after seeing Verlice outside Safeway, I woke up before sunrise. The sky outside my bedroom window was a soft, indifferent gray. Still, the cold felt different that day, less numbing, more clarifying, like something in the air had shifted. Or maybe it was just me. At 7:12 a.m., while sipping from my chipped ceramic mug, the one I kept out of stubbornness, I saw the email notification on my phone. Subject: about the Elmore estate. It was from Thorne, not some anonymous attorney. Thorne had been with our family for years. He knew our birthdays, our messes, our milestones. He'd drafted the first version of my dad's will. Now he was writing to me, not as a family friend, but as a lawyer with concerns. Anselma, the message read, I have reason to believe the second version of your father's will contains significant discrepancies. Please review the attached documents at your earliest convenience. We need to speak. I opened the file, side-by-side scans. One dated a few months before Dad's health went downhill. My name clearly listed. A third split marked for a local animal shelter. Verlies still got the bulk, but I was there. Then the second document, recent, abrupt, and cold. Verlies's name stood alone. I didn't need to squint to catch the differences. The signature flowed differently. The ink was newer. The notarization stamp lacked its usual county watermark. And the date? It was the same weekend Dad was hospitalized with pneumonia and hallucinating. He couldn't even hold a spoon then, let alone a pen. I stared at the screen, then hit forward to my own attorney. No emotion, just action. Later that afternoon, I met Thorne at his office. A modest building downtown, all warm wood and old brass. He offered coffee. I declined. I can't officially advise you unless retained, he said. But off the record, this smells like coercion, or at the very least, a misrepresentation. Also, assigning full estate rights to one party without the spouse's co-signature violates Colorado joint property statutes. I folded my hands in my lap. So what happens next? He hesitated. An inquiry has already been opened. Someone sent documents anonymously to the State Legal Review Board. I assume it wasn't you. I didn't answer, because it didn't matter who'd opened the door. The truth has a way of walking in, uninvited, once there's a crack. That night, I lit one candle and sat at my desk. I didn't write a long post. No hashtags, no callouts, no fire, just a sentence. When they tried to erase me from paper, I wrote myself back in ink. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't enable comments. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. A message from Verlies. This is getting out of hand. Take it down. You're humiliating us. I read it once, then again, and then I placed the phone screen down on the table and kept the candle lit. I didn't feel the urge to reply. For the first time, their discomfort wasn't my responsibility. Their silence wasn't suffocating me. It was shielding them from the weight of everything I finally had the power to say. Because here's the thing no one tells you, silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the final word. Closure isn't always a door slammed. Sometimes it's just you walking away. 3 weeks passed. The snow that once muffled the sidewalks had receded into slush, and even that had dried now, leaving behind faint salt stains on the curbs. The mornings no longer bit at my fingers. Instead, they brushed past them, offering something softer, like the world was thawing alongside me. I hadn't followed the court proceedings, not in real time, not with popcorn or commentary. I didn't need to sit through transcripts or refresh court dockets. I got a summary from Thorne, concise, professional, devoid of sentiment. Kadrian Elmore has been summoned for further inquiry regarding estate irregularities. Sorrel Elmore declined to offer a statement. No apology, no confession, no grand unraveling, just silence, which, oddly enough, felt louder than words. There's a kind of peace that comes when the noise finally dies down, even if it's just from people giving up the act. That morning, instead of diving into social feeds or the endless scroll of takes and hashtags, I grabbed my coat and walked 2 blocks to a small corner cafe I hadn't stepped into in years. The bell above the door still jingled like a memory. The owner, Marta, still wore her hair in that loose silver bun. She blinked, then lit up. "Anselma?" she said. "Where have you been hiding, girl?" I smiled. "Busy rediscovering air." She chuckled and poured me a black coffee without asking. "It's on the house," she said. "You always tip too much." I took my mug to a seat by the window and watched people drift by. Bundled couples, grocery bags, toddlers in puffer jackets. Life didn't wait for the dust to settle. It just kept moving. Maybe I could too. I opened my laptop, not to work, not to scroll, but to write. For the first time in a long time, I logged into my old blog, a relic from college days when I still believed my words might echo somewhere. I titled the post, "Some Truths Don't Need an Audience, Just Air to Breathe." And I wrote. I wrote about grief that doesn't come from death, about losing people who still breathe the same air but feel galaxies away, about how silence from the people you love can feel worse than shouting from strangers. I didn't name them, didn't point fingers or rehash old wounds. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about breath. My own. How I learned to exhale without waiting for someone else's approval. That afternoon, back at the office, I was organizing files when the front desk buzzed. "There's someone here to see you," my assistant said. "She didn't have an appointment." It was Mrs. Delaney. I hadn't seen her in years. Wrinkles had deepened around her eyes, but her posture was upright, determined. "You probably don't remember me," she said, her voice kind but weathered. "You helped me save my home. I never forgot." I did remember. A mess of paperwork, a last-minute refinance, a handwritten thank you card. But I hadn't expected her to walk in years later just to say this. "Thank you," she said again, "for being steady, for not letting me give up." She left after 10 minutes. Nothing dramatic. But when the door shut behind her, I felt something unfamiliar flood my chest. Not pride, not validation, just peace. That night, I got home to find a small cream envelope in my mailbox. No return address. My name was written in soft blue ink, careful cursive. Inside, one line. "You didn't deserve any of it. I'm sorry. Claire." No explanation, no defense, just those words. I didn't text her, didn't forward it to anyone. I folded the note and slid it into the back of my journal. Not to forgive, not to forget, just to witness it. Because sometimes acknowledgement matters more than apology. Later, I lit a candle and turned off every device I owned. No background noise, no screen glare, just me. I opened my journal and wrote one final entry. "I am not the forgotten daughter. I am the one who remembered myself." I closed the book slowly. The apartment was still. But for the first time, it wasn't empty. Because I wasn't either. I stood by the window, watching the city breathe in quiet pulses of light. My reflection stared back, tired, but whole. I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up for me anymore. I had. And that was enough. When your family tries to define your worth by how much you give, how quiet you stay, or how little you ask for, walk away with your dignity intact. The silence you once thought was strength might have just been fear dressed as loyalty. And when you finally speak, when you finally reclaim your voice, they won't know what to do with the sound. I didn't get justice in the way I first imagined. There was no dramatic apology, no overnight healing. But I got something better. Clarity, freedom, and self-respect. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. Peace doesn't always arrive with closure. It often comes from choosing yourself even when no one else does. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel like your existence was inconvenient, know this. You're not alone and you're not invisible. Not here. Not in this space. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been pushed aside by the people you trusted most? Did you stay silent or did you finally speak up? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched you, drop a 1 in the chat or tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if this video didn't resonate, I'd still love to hear why. What would you have done differently? What does healing look like to you? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want more real stories that don't sugarcoat family, identity, or healing. Your voice matters here, and so does your experience. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, they can try to erase you, but they can't erase your truth. And one day, that truth will speak louder than their silence ever did. Hi, I'm Akina. At Christmas, my parents gave my seat to a stranger. Not metaphorically, my name was literally replaced at the table. They put me near the door, like I was just dropping by. That night, I watched them toast the people who stole from me. I watched them give my gift to someone else. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been rewriting the story for years, quietly cutting me out of everything, my savings, the will, even the family photo wall. And when I finally stepped back, they didn't apologize. They deleted me. But what happens when the one you erase has the receipts and finally decides to use them? It was Christmas Eve in Savannah, and the wind didn't care about holiday spirit. It slipped beneath my coat collar like a thief, sharp and deliberate, even though I'd layered up. Zadie, my daughter, held my hand tight. Her other arm clutched a tinfoil-covered casserole dish, mac and cheese, extra breadcrumbs, because I remembered who liked it that way. We stood outside my parents' house for longer than we should have. No porch light, no welcome sign, no bark from the neighbor's dog like when I used to live here. Just the sound of our shoes scuffing the steps and the slight tremble in Zadie's breath as she said, "Maybe they're busy." I rang the bell, waited. Nothing. After a full minute, I reached for the back door, the one I used to sneak out of as a teenager and sneak back through when Dad went to bed early. It wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. The smell hit me first. Rosemary, cinnamon ham, something baking that hadn't come from a store. I paused in the threshold for a second. It should have felt like coming home. But standing there, balancing hot food and a child, something inside me hesitated. The kind of hesitation that didn't come from nerves, but recognition. Like my body already knew something my head didn't want to admit. No one looked up. My mother, Clarabelle, was at the counter, folding cloth napkins into hard little triangles. Maris, my older sister, was laughing too loud at something her best friend said. Dad stood by the living room window, swirling bourbon in his hand, like he'd just walked off a Southern novel cover. No one asked why I'd come in through the back. No one asked how I was. I set the dish down quietly and brushed snow from Zadie's shoulders. "Hi," I said, voice too soft. "We brought dessert." Clarabelle didn't stop folding napkins. Maris turned her head slightly, then went right back to whatever she was whispering. I waited another beat before stepping closer. "We brought mac and cheese, and that cranberry pie you like." "Oh," Clarabelle finally said, not turning. "We thought you might not come this year." My stomach folded the same way those napkins did. I confirmed with Maris 2 weeks ago. Maris looked up now. "Right. It's just been so crazy lately. You know how the holidays are." I didn't respond. I helped Zadie out of her coat and looked toward the dining room. That's when I saw it. 12 seats, all dressed with silver-rimmed plates, linen napkins, and handwritten name cards, Maris's handwriting, loopy and deliberate, like always. I scanned for mine. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I'd find it on the far end, near the kids' section, if they even had one. Nothing. Instead, right next to the entryway where Boots dripped water onto the mat, I saw it. A small wooden stool, the kind you use when you need to reach the top cabinet. On it sat my name, folded into a tent card, right beneath the thermostat, next to the coat rack, where guests dropped scarves and dogs shook off snow. "Mommy," Zadie whispered, tugging my sleeve. "Why aren't we sitting at the big table?" I glanced toward the long mahogany piece that I used to polish every Thanksgiving. Maris's friend, the one who divorced last year, was sitting in the spot I used to fill, right beside Dad. Her cardigan was draped over the back like she owned it. Clarabelle must have noticed us staring. "We figured it'd be easier for you and Zadie, near the door in case she gets fussy. The seat's right there." She didn't say it unkindly. That almost made it worse. Zadie looked up at me, confused but quiet. Her fingers were still clutching the edge of her sleeve. I could see the worry behind her big brown eyes, the same look she gave me when I picked her up late from aftercare, and she thought maybe I forgot. I knelt down, brushing her hair behind her ear. "It's okay, baby. Let's just get settled." I said it like I believed it. I didn't. We sat on the stool, the draft from the door wrapped around us like we didn't belong. I helped her unwrap the tinfoil from the casserole, still warm, untouched. The room buzzed with voices and laughter, familiar, but not meant for me. The fireplace crackled from across the room, but the heat never made it to where we sat. Zadie nibbled on a roll someone handed her. I sat still, watching the others laugh, pass dishes, take photos with people they'd only known since Easter brunch. No one asked how my job was going. No one asked how the move went after I'd been forced to downsize post-divorce. And I didn't expect much, but I had expected something. Even silence used to feel like shared history. This felt like removal. I used to set that table, every year. Used to help Maris pick out centerpieces. Used to drop extra cash into Clarabelle's account when she said the light bill had gotten a little tight after Dad's surgery. Used to carry things, quietly, without receipts. I counted. 1 casserole, 1 child, and 0 acknowledgement. Zadie leaned into my shoulder, resting her head there. "Are we gonna stay long?" she whispered. I looked around the room again, the family I used to fight to hold together, too busy laughing with everyone but me. "Not too long," I said. I didn't squeeze her hand, not yet. We lingered at that tiny stool near the door until Zadie's legs began to swing slowly beneath her, a quiet signal that she was done sitting but didn't know where else to be. The sound in the house stayed the same, silverware clinking, glasses refilled, voices rising and dipping without us. Nothing was wrong on the surface, but everything had shifted under it. I helped carry the dessert tray into the kitchen, not because anyone asked, but because habits die hard. Maris was leaned up against the counter, telling her friend about a rental property she and Lazaro were eyeing in Destin. 2 blocks from the beach, she said, laughing. "We'll Airbnb the crap out of it when we're not using it." Her friend nodded, like they were in on a secret the rest of us didn't qualify for. Clarabelle poured white wine into stemless glasses, 3 in a row, not one extended in my direction. She didn't even glance up when I set down the casserole dish, now lukewarm and untouched. Someone mumbled, "Akina's here, right?" But it was more confirmation than welcome. I smiled. Not out of politeness, just to prove to myself that my face still moved that way. Zadie stood by the hallway archway, clutching her sketch pad. I motioned for her to come sit near me on the couch. Instead, she found her way to the rug where the other kids had piled up. Nieces, nephews, Maris's goddaughter, all in a circle around a tablet playing a holiday cartoon. I should have known better than to think it would go unnoticed when she wasn't called by name. Clarabelle passed out hot chocolate in matching red mugs. She handed one to every child. When she reached Zadie, she paused, mug in hand. "Did Zadie even send a list this year?" she asked with a furrowed brow, turning slightly toward Maris. "She did," I said quickly. "I emailed it to you Thanksgiving weekend." "Oh," she said, blinking. "Maybe it got lost in the shuffle. You know how these things go." Zadie looked up from the rug, trying not to show she was listening, but her hand stilled over her coloring. She sat upright, her small back suddenly tense. I knelt down beside her. "They might have just missed it," I said softly. She whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" The pit in my stomach grew teeth. Before I could say anything, the call for the family photo rang out like a fire drill. Everyone shuffled toward the fireplace, where Clarabelle had staged poinsettias and garlands for her annual, card-worthy snapshot. I helped clear the mess of toys and crumbs, wiping juice off the floor after one of the toddlers tipped their cup. By the time I turned around, everyone was already lined up, Dad in the middle, Maris on one side, Clarabelle on the other. The rest clustered naturally into place, as if rehearsed. "Smile!" Maris's friend called from behind the phone. I was still off to the side, halfway between helping and waiting for instruction. No one called for me, so I stood there, just out of frame. "Don't worry, we'll take another one later," someone said absently, but they didn't. A few minutes later, I saw the picture posted on Maurice's social media. The caption read, "Bickford family, whole again." Zadie was not in it. Neither was I. Dinner began not long after. The roast came out, The rolls were passed, and laughter filled every inch of space except the corner where Zadie and I sat with our plates in our laps. I didn't realize what was missing until the gifts were brought out. The kids formed a loose semicircle around the tree. Laughter rose as the name tags were read aloud, and colorful bags changed hands. Zadie kept glancing at me, smiling each time another kid got a gift. Her name wasn't called. I watched Clarabelle reach for another package, glance at the tag, then at Zadie, and pause. "I think we might have missed one," she said, almost convincing herself. "She didn't write a letter this year, did she?" "She did," I said. "I saw her write it myself. It had stickers." Clarabelle smiled tightly. "Well, maybe it didn't make it into the pile. We'll find something later." Zadie stayed quiet, her fingers picking at the hem of her sweater. "I'm sorry, sweetie," I said later, wrapping my arm around her. "It wasn't you. It was never you." She nodded against my side, but didn't say anything. As the evening faded, I tucked her into a borrowed blanket on the pull-out couch. The light from the Christmas tree flickered across her face, painting soft gold against the shadows. I watched her chest rise and fall, the steady rhythm of a child trying not to cry while drifting to sleep. In the corner, Maris laughed at something Lazaro said. Clarabelle looked over at them the way people do when they've already chosen a side and decided not to budge. I sat down next to my daughter, pulled out my phone, and opened the Notes app. Typed, "No more defending what erases me." I didn't write it with anger. I wrote it with finality. After I set my phone down, I sat there for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't just hang in the room, it hums under your skin. Clarabelle and Maris were still talking near the fireplace, their voices low but bright, as if joy was something they could perform on cue. I stood, slowly, careful not to wake Zadie, and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water I didn't really want. The faucet hissed like it was irritated to be needed. As I drank, I let my eyes drift across the space. The polished counters, the worn holiday towel from years ago still hanging near the oven handle, the fake poinsettia arrangement Maris had bought last season because it photographed better. Everything was familiar, but none of it felt mine anymore. It hit me then, all at once. How much I had done for these people. How little of it had names on it. My name, to be exact. I remembered standing outside the grocery store 3 Decembers ago, holding a plastic bag of medication for Dad, arguing with the insurance rep over the phone because Clarabelle said she didn't understand the paperwork. I had paid the invoice on the spot, from the only bonus I'd gotten that quarter. Not a thank you, just a follow-up call a week later, asking if I'd checked on the electric bill too. Back then, it didn't even sting. I chalked it up to family. You give, you help. You don't keep track. Until they do. Of what wasn't yours to begin with. Sometime after dinner, when the wine started flowing heavier, and the noise swelled into that soft chaos only families can create, Clarabelle clinked a spoon against her glass. "Let's raise a glass," she said, standing with her usual calm authority. "To Maris and Lazaro, for everything they've carried this year, especially with your dad's health scare." She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. He gave her a quiet smile, dazed but content. "They've been our rock, really. I don't know where we'd be without them." Maris grinned, lifted her glass with a performative flair. Lazaro gave a smug nod, not even pretending to be humble. "And me?" I sat in the corner by the end table, half in shadow, fully in disbelief. The home nurse, billed to my card. The portable oxygen, arranged through my job's concierge service. The groceries when Clarabelle said they were stretching. Mine delivered, no questions asked. I stared at my half-empty wineglass. The edge of it trembled just slightly, but I kept my hand steady. Not a word, not a look in my direction. It wasn't just omission, it was a rewrite. "Cheers," Clarabelle said, and glasses clinked around the room. No one noticed I didn't raise mine. Later that night, as the wrapping paper storm began and the big gifts were passed out, Maris handed Clarabelle a long box wrapped in silver foil. Clarabelle passed it to Dad with a proud smile. "This one's from Maris and Laz," she announced, already reaching for her phone to record the moment. I knew that box. 6 weeks ago, I'd ordered a shearling coat online. Dad had hinted about one in October, after seeing a similar one in a catalog. I'd saved for it, tracked shipping twice, and wrapped it myself with a handwritten card that read, "To the man who taught me loyalty before words. Merry Christmas." Akina. Dad tore into the paper like a kid. "Now this," he said, holding it up. "This is sharp. You two really know me." Zadie, who had watched me wrap that very box in our apartment, looked over at me, confused. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she might say something. I shook my head once, just enough. "Not now, baby." I didn't ask where the card went. I didn't accuse. But I knew, and so did Maris. She didn't meet my eyes. Sometime after that, Clarabelle stood up again, a folded piece of stationery in her hand. "I wrote something," she said, voice soft, almost maternal. "Just a little something to say thank you to the people who made this year bearable." The room went quiet, not out of anticipation, more like habit. When Clarabelle spoke, people listened. She had that way about her. She cleared her throat and began. "To the children who showed up, not just in presence but in effort, who made meals, arranged rides, covered gaps without asking, who reminded me that family is not just blood, but commitment." She looked around the room, smiling at each name she read. To Maris, for never letting me face paperwork alone. To Lazaro, for bringing humor and lightness during the hardest days. To Greg, for always calling, even when he couldn't visit. That was it. She folded the paper with care, tucked it into her purse like it belonged to history. No mention of me. Not even Zadie. I stayed seated. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. Zadie didn't ask this time. Clarabelle poured herself another glass of wine. Maris slipped into the kitchen with Lazaro, laughing again. Too loud, like always. I opened the Notes app on my phone again, typed, 3 mentions, none of them mine. Then another line. This is what erasure looks like. Not loud, just done. I slid my phone back into my coat pocket and leaned into the quiet. The clatter of dessert forks and after-dinner chatter had settled into that hazy lull where half the room reaches for coffee and the other half starts checking the clock. Zadie was asleep again, curled in the corner of the couch under the blanket I'd pulled over her earlier. Her small body rising and falling steadily was the only rhythm I trusted in that house. The first wave of guests, Maris's goddaughter and her parents, started bundling up by the door. Scarves, boots, plastic containers full of leftover pie. The goodbyes were loud and long, full of fake promises to do brunch next week and not let months pass again. I knew none of those things would happen. Maris and her best friend laughed as they rinsed wine glasses. Clarabelle stood by the counter, swirling what was left in her bottle and humming along to a version of Silent Night, playing softly on the Bluetooth speaker. She walked over, calm as ever. "You're staying the night, right?" she asked, more of a statement than a question. "Can you help rinse up before you turn in?" It wasn't cruel. That's what made it worse. It was automatic. The way someone might ask a waitress for more butter. I nodded. But something inside felt different, stiffer, like something had snapped into place and wasn't bending back. I stepped into the kitchen and started clearing plates. No one thanked me. No one noticed. Clarabelle was now on the phone with one of her church friends, speaker on full blast. Her voice had the bright lilt she reserved for public image maintenance. "Yes, Maris has just been incredible," she said. "Honestly, she carried this whole season. I don't know how I'd manage without her. She's really the one who shows up, you know?" I stacked the dishes quietly, one on top of the other. Lazaro walked by, drying his hands on a dish towel. He gave me a little smirk and said, "Still the family elf, huh?" I kept loading the dishwasher. Didn't flinch, didn't laugh, didn't answer. A few minutes later, as I scrubbed the last of the pie crust off a chipped baking pan, my finger caught the edge. Not deep, but sharp enough to sting. The kind of cut that doesn't bleed right away, just burns as a reminder that, yes, Something got under your skin. I pressed a paper towel around it and didn't look up when Maris entered the kitchen behind me. "You're amazing, you know that?" she said, pouring herself a splash of wine. "Most people would have left after tonight, but you just power through." I didn't answer. "You've always been the quiet one," she added, almost like it was a compliment. By the time Clarabelle called everyone back to the living room for one last toast, the air had that slow drag of a night stretching past welcome. The guests were gone. Just us now, core family and residual tension. Clarabelle held her wine glass at chest height and gave a warm smile like she was about to accept an award. "This year," she began, "was not easy. But if there's one person who got us through it, truly held this family together, it was Maris." I sat near the archway, drying my hands with a towel I didn't remember bringing in. "She always knows what to say, what to do, and where to be," Clarabelle continued. "She's intuitive, dependable, and selfless." People clapped. Even Greg, who showed up late and said 3 words all night, nodded in agreement. No one looked at me. I pulled out my phone, tapped open notes, and wrote, "They can't see you when they've already decided who the hero is." Later, when the others had disappeared to their respective corners of the house, I took Zadie upstairs. No one told us where to sleep, so I found the guest room with the twin bed and a nightstand missing a drawer. I laid her down gently, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and crawled in beside her. The applause still echoed in my head, not because it was loud, but because it was final. Zadie stirred a little and whispered, "I like the tree lights, Mommy." "Me too," I whispered back. "Just not the house they're in." And I knew by morning I'd no longer keep their secrets for them. I woke before the house stirred, the kind of early that didn't belong to alarms or roosters, just the kind born from decision. The room was dim, the light outside still a deep gray. Beside me, Zadie lay tucked in, cheeks flushed from sleep, her little fist curled close to her chest. I didn't move fast. I didn't have to. I just knew that by the time the coffee brewed downstairs, I'd already be gone, emotionally, if not yet physically. I got dressed in silence, layered up as quietly as I could. The hallway was empty, not a creak on the stairs. I slipped into the kitchen, grabbed my tote from the corner where I left it, and unzipped it. Inside, beneath a scarf and an old receipt for allergy meds, was the manila folder. It had lived in that bag for over a year. Patient, unopened, but not forgotten. I placed it on the kitchen counter like it was nothing more than a grocery list. Maris entered from the hallway in full makeup, too awake for the hour. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "Still playing Santa?" I smiled, but not at her. "Just tying up loose ends." Breakfast started 20 minutes later. Clarabelle stood at the stove scrambling eggs. Maris set the table. Dad sat in his usual seat with the newspaper folded neatly beside him, even though he hadn't read the fine print in years. I waited until the plates were filled, the napkins unfolded, and the silence was comfortably boring. "This will be the last holiday I contribute anything," I said. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. Clarabelle looked up from her eggs, blinked. "Sorry?" "No more tuition," I continued, glancing at her. "No more bills? No more cushion?" Lazaro chuckled. "Didn't realize you were still pitching in?" Maris let out a soft snort. "What, like the $20 for the tree last year?" I didn't respond with a quip. I reached into my tote and pulled out a sheet of paper, actually 5 sheets, stapled together, color-coded, time-stamped. I slid it across the table toward Clarabelle. She hesitated, then took it. Her eyes moved left to right, line by line. Deposits, pharmacy charges, school fees, insurance overages, grocery reimbursements she never returned. It took 2 minutes to read. She used none of them to say a word. I leaned back slightly. "Just so it's clear," I said, "who actually showed up?" Nobody argued. That told me more than if they had. After breakfast, I stood, walked over to the hallway bench, and pulled out my phone. I opened the videos folder and found the one I'd saved last December. Clarabelle had been sitting in Dad's hospital room then, her eyes puffy, her voice trembling. I'd filmed her on mute at first. She didn't know. But then she turned to me and said the words that lived rent-free in my memory ever since. "Without Akina, we'd have lost everything," she said. "She saved our home, saved me." I pressed play now, volume up. The room quieted again. You could hear the heater click on in the background, the clink of a spoon against ceramic. Clarabelle's voice from the video filled the space. "She's the only one who figured out the insurance, the only one who stayed after visiting hours." I let the video end naturally. I didn't add commentary, didn't look for applause. When it ended, I clicked the screen off, slipped the phone back into my coat, and went to zip it, slow, deliberate. Maris cleared her throat. "That was private." "No," I said. "It was unspoken. There's a difference." Clarabelle didn't say anything, just reached for her cup again. Her hand trembled a little. Zadie came down from the stairs not long after, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her bunny socks sliding on the floor. "Morning, baby," I said, crouching to meet her. "We're heading out soon." "Already?" "We've done what we needed to do." As we moved toward the door, she asked to use the bathroom. I nodded and waited in the hallway. That's when I saw the photo wall. Birthday parties, vacations, cookouts, Maris and Lazaro in different outfits, year after year. Clarabelle in front of the hydrangeas, Dad asleep on the recliner, Zadie as a toddler in someone else's arms. Frame after frame of a family I supposedly belonged to, and not one with me in it. Not a single photo. I stepped back, just one pace, enough to see the wall from a distance. Zadie came out and grabbed my hand. "Ready?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." I didn't slam the door when I left, but they heard it close anyway. By the time we pulled the car out of the driveway, the frost on the windshield had started to melt. I didn't blast the heat. I let the silence sit between us, same way it had all morning inside that house. Zadie held a candy cane she hadn't eaten, rolling it slowly in her palm like she was waiting for a reason to keep it. We didn't drive far, just to the gas station, where I topped off the tank and let her run inside to use the bathroom. I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring ahead at nothing. Clarabelle hadn't called. Maris hadn't texted. They didn't need to. I'd made my position clear. I was out. Or so I thought. When we returned later that afternoon, because Zadie had forgotten her sketchbook and begged to retrieve it before heading back home, the energy had shifted. The kitchen smelled like reheated ham, the kind that lingers just enough to remind you that joy was had and you weren't invited to it. Clarabelle caught me near the door, half smile in place. "About what you said yesterday," she began, voice sweet but measured. "Are you sure you're not, maybe reacting a little strongly?" "I'm not reacting," I told her, steady as the tile beneath me. "I'm realigning." From the hallway, Lazaro called out, "Don't stress it, Akina. We'll all laugh about this in a week." It wasn't funny. I headed to the den where Zadie's things were. That's when I passed Clarabelle's home office. The door was cracked, the desk lamp still on, papers neatly stacked in that compulsive way she always arranged everything. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The top sheet of the file was labeled Revised Estate Plan, bolded, dated last month. I flipped it open just enough to scan the beneficiaries. Maris, Lazaro. Then a line for the lake house, our family's property upstate, a place I was once told would be mine. My name? Absent. Clarabelle entered behind me without a word. I didn't flinch, didn't turn. "You're not even in the same state anymore," she said, as if that explained theft. This just made more sense. "I'm in this family," I replied, or at least I was. She didn't apologize. She didn't offer anything, just moved past me, hand on the folder, ready to tuck it away like all things she preferred hidden. We left not long after. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't look back at the dining room, or the ornaments, or the wrapping paper still strewn across the floor like evidence of joy. That night, when we returned, because plans had changed, because Clarabelle insisted Zadie stay for tradition's sake, I found a handwritten note taped to the door of the room we were meant to sleep in. Laundry room, temporary guest space. There wasn't a bed, just a thin mattress folded over the dryer. A sheet, no pillows, no lamp, no window. Zadie stood in the doorway, holding her stuffed bear like a question. "Is this our fault?" she asked. "No, baby," I said, kneeling down beside her. "This is what people do when they want to punish someone without looking like they are." I laid her down gently, placed the blanket over her, and then sat beside the washer. The rumble of the pipes in the wall was louder than usual, like the house was tired of itself. I pulled the manila folder from my tote bag and spread it across my lap. Medical receipts, bank transfers, printed emails with Clarabelle's subject lines. "Just a little short this month." And, "Any chance you could cover this too?" I wasn't looking for proof. I already had it. I was looking for the nerve to do something about it. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table while everyone else fluttered around, pretending nothing happened. Dad flipped pages of the newspaper he couldn't read. Maris gushed about some new brand deal she was working on. Lazaro made jokes about holiday calories. Clarabelle, as always, played referee through it all. She didn't say a word to me. So I said one to her. "You already wrote me out of your will," I said flatly. "Now I'm writing you out of my piece." Maris looked up from her phone. "You're being dramatic," she scoffed. I didn't lift my head. "You're just not used to me having lines. That's not the same as me not having them." Nobody replied. Zadie reached for my hand under the table, gave it a squeeze. This time, I squeezed back. I stopped being a participant in their story. I became the editor of mine. 2 days passed. We were home. I'd washed every piece of laundry that smelled faintly of their house, even the blanket Zadie clung to on the ride back. It wasn't about the scent. It was about what stayed in the fibers, what lingered between the threads. I folded it anyway, put it in the hall closet, closed the door. That morning, I opened my laptop to check my accounts. It was routine. I'd done it for years, more out of habit than worry. But this time, something felt off before I even clicked anything. The tab spun longer than usual, like the system itself was stalling. The number on the screen wasn't a typo. 12102s. I blinked. Refreshed. Looked again. Still there. My savings account, which had held over $92,000. Gone. Every last cent pulled out in small, consistent withdrawals. I scrolled through the activity log, my fingers stiff. All transfers labeled family reallocation or shared emergency use. Dates stretched back 3 months, and every single withdrawal was authorized through a linked device, Clarabelle's tablet. I called the bank. The rep, cheerful and efficient, confirmed my identity and walked me through the details. Yes, the device was on the profile. Yes, the routing number matched. And no, technically, there had been no breach. Just authorized family access from a shared history. "You're still the account holder," she said brightly, like that was consolation. But the account had already been gutted. I didn't cry. Not then. I closed the laptop and sat with my hands in my lap, staring at the wall across from me. It had been one thing to be forgotten, ignored, erased from cards and thank yous. It was another to be robbed by the very people who once said, "We're all in this together." Later that day, I messaged my cousin Dina. She and I had always exchanged New Year's cards. I asked if she was going to the family brunch Clarabelle usually hosted the Sunday after Christmas. "Didn't you see the invite?" she replied. I checked my inbox. Nothing. No calendar notification. No group text. I scrolled through the family thread. Gone. I had been removed from the conversation entirely. Not archived, not muted. Removed. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I messaged Maris directly. "Looks like I'm out of the loop," she replied almost instantly. Well, you said you were out, right? No emoji, no punctuation, just cold precision. Not long after that, I got an alert on my phone from the backup bank account I had once set up for emergencies, back when Dad was recovering from his stroke, and Clarabelle claimed they needed a buffer just in case. I still had access, or so I thought. The alert said, "Changes made to shared access permissions." I logged in. My name was gone. In its place? Maris. Lazaro. That was the final confirmation. They hadn't just cut me out emotionally or symbolically. They had worked, strategically, silently, to push me out of every formal system that held us together. I sat at my desk in the living room. The sun had gone behind the trees, casting long blue shadows across the floor. Zadie was in her room, drawing, humming to herself. She didn't know anything had changed. That was the one thing I could still protect. I picked up the landline. Not the cell, not a text, not an email. I dialed the house number I still remembered without looking. Maris answered. Of course she did. Hello? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. You're good at wiping names, I said evenly. But you're not good at erasing truth. That part always returns, with interest. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because that night, I did what they feared the most. I didn't threaten, I filed. 2 days after the call, I sat across from a woman named Deborah in a modest law office in downtown Savannah. Her desk was clean but lived in, with a jar of peppermint candies between us and 2 framed photos behind her. One of her dog, one of her daughter graduating law school. She didn't offer me coffee. I appreciated that. I've seen a lot, she said, flipping through the folder I'd handed her. But your documentation is one of the cleanest I've come across. Detailed, dated, and emotionally removed. That last part matters in court. I said nothing. She looked up over her glasses. Do you want to try mediation first? No? Okay, she said, tapping her pen once against the folder. Let's file. She outlined the basics: civil fraud, misuse of jointly accessed accounts, and restitution. She didn't ask me to relive every detail. I think she could already see it in the paper trail, the pattern, the timing, the precision of betrayal. It took all of 15 minutes. After signing the final page, I leaned back in the chair and exhaled through my nose. It wasn't relief. Not yet. Just a shift. Deborah slid her copy into a manila envelope. They're going to be surprised. I looked her in the eye. I'm counting on it. 2 days later, a certified envelope arrived at my mother's doorstep. Signed for by Lazaro. Hand-delivered. Documented. According to the case log, Maris read it first. Plaintiff, Akina Elling. Lazaro swore, loudly enough for the neighbor to hear. Clarabelle didn't raise her voice. She didn't even ask what it said. She walked into the dining room, picked up her phone, and began deleting every picture she had of me. Just like that. Like it was an app you uninstall. Not long after, I received a voicemail from her. No apology, just, call me if you want to fix this. I didn't return it. Instead, I opened a different drawer. One I hadn't touched in months. It held every receipt I'd ever kept out of instinct. Hospital discharge forms, Walgreens pharmacy notes with my signature, notes scribbled during calls with insurance reps, emails Clarabelle forwarded to me with subject lines like, "Please help again," and "One last time, I promise." There were over 60 of them. I scanned them in batches, labeling each PDF. I highlighted totals, circled key phrases. This wasn't vengeance. This was verification. I used to think keeping proof made me petty, but I realized it made me prepared. They'd mistaken my quiet for consent. That was their mistake. Later that week, I uploaded everything into a secured cloud folder. My lawyer smiled when I told her I'd organized it by category. I knew you were sharp, she said, but you're making me look lazy. I told her it was easy to track people when they never expect you to. That weekend, the ripple effect began. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years started texting me. Short messages, some cautious, some genuine. I didn't know. Are you okay? We always felt like something was off. I didn't respond to most of them. Not because I was bitter. I just wasn't building a support group. I was building a boundary. Then I saw Maris's Facebook post. White background, black cursive font. That vague emotional tone designed to stir sympathy without specifics. Family doesn't sue family. Some wounds never heal. But the betrayal still hurts. The comments were full of people validating her. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I bookmarked it. Because I wasn't finished yet. I hadn't even opened the last folder. The folder stayed on my desk until spring. I didn't rush to open it. It wasn't waiting to hurt me, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. We just sat with each other for a while, like two people who had already said all they needed to say. By June, it was over. The court awarded me a partial restitution, $68,000. Not everything I lost, but more than I expected. Enough to cover what mattered and let go of what didn't. The real victory wasn't the number. It was the silence that followed. A silence not built on fear or exclusion, but on completion. Nothing left to prove. Maris lost two of her biggest design clients within a month. One of them had seen the lawsuit filing online, public record. The other just felt like the timing wasn't right. Clarabelle had tried to smooth it over, called in a favor from a church friend who worked in PR. But a reputation built on image has nowhere to hide once the image cracks. Lazaro, it turns out, had been sloppy. A flagged audit exposed inconsistencies in one of his side businesses, which wasn't much more than invoice shuffling and tax loopholes. His credit lines froze. The next round of investment funding? Gone. None of this came from me. I didn't report anyone. I didn't leak anything. The truth, once pulled from silence, walks on its own. One afternoon in July, I checked the family group thread on instinct. Still gone, still blocked. Then I saw the email. From Clarabelle. Subject line. We didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't open it. You don't open the door again just because someone finally knocks. Zadie and I moved that same week. Nothing grand. A small duplex outside downtown Savannah. It had creaky floors and a front porch too shallow for real chairs. But the sunlight hit just right in the mornings, and the kitchen felt like it belonged to someone honest. We painted Zadie's room together, lemon yellow. She picked it, said it felt like the color of starting over. There's a new drawing on our fridge now. 3 stick figures. Me, Zadie. A small cat she insists will adopt this fall. Above it, in purple crayon, Mom plus me, home. We go to the farmer's market every Saturday. Sometimes we run into people from the old church. Sometimes they say things like, "We miss seeing you around," or "Hope your mom's doing okay." I smile, keep walking. Zadie never asks about the lawsuit, not directly. But one morning, while we were both eating cereal on the porch, she looked up and said, "You think we'll ever go back there?" I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "No, baby, we're not meant to." She nodded like she already knew that. Later that day, I received a Zillow alert. Out of habit, I clicked. The old house was listed. For sale. The photos were bright and overly staged. Everything about it looked designed to forget. But the living room shot? The one that showed the wall where our family pictures used to hang? It was bare. The same space that once excluded me, now excluded everyone. That wall had been a declaration. Now it was drywall. I closed the listing. Didn't save it. Healing doesn't need reminders. Just room. Most nights now, I sit by the window while Zadie sleeps, and I watch the street stay quiet. Not lonely. Just quiet. It's taken me years to understand that freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits with you at the table you built yourself, in a house no one else claimed, and simply refuses to explain itself. They can say I was too cold, too distant, too much. But I know what I was. I was consistent. I was generous. And when I saw the damage, I didn't yell. I just stopped handing them the tools. You don't owe people the version of you that keeps their stories clean. You owe yourself a life that doesn't hurt just to stay in. I don't miss the seat they gave away. I'm building the table now. Hi, I'm Maura. I didn't think announcing my pregnancy at my husband's birthday party would change everything, but it did. You see, my sister-in-law, Darlie, handed me a plate of food that night. Everyone thought she was being sweet, thought she was trying to make things right. But what if I told you that plate wasn't just food, and I wasn't the one who ate it? And what happened next? It wasn't just betrayal. It was something far colder, calculated, covered in years of fake smiles and, "I'm just looking out for you." Everyone says family protects you. But what happens when they're the ones who sharpen the knife? Would you still call that family? Or just a threat with your last name? Because I didn't see it coming until someone else hit the ground. I still remember the way the sun hit the gravel driveway when we pulled up to Velda's house. It was the kind of early spring afternoon that should have felt warm and welcoming, but something in my chest already knew better. Lyle reached across the car to squeeze my hand like he always did, like it was second nature, like he knew this wasn't going to be easy for me. We stepped out together, but from the moment we crossed the threshold, I knew I wasn't part of the picture. There was a large board perched on an easel near the entrance, handwritten calligraphy, gold accents, names listed elegantly under a header. Family and close friends for Lyle's 39th. I read down the list, eyes catching every name. His coworkers, childhood buddies, even his ex's name was printed, bold and centered under special guests. I scanned twice before Lyle whispered, "Do you see your name?" I shook my head, jaw clenched. He leaned toward Velda as she came down the hallway with a tray of deviled eggs and asked, "Hey, Mom, why isn't Maura's name on the list?" She blinked, as if the question surprised her. "Oh, honey, I thought you were bringing her. So we just put +1. You know, to keep the layout balanced." To keep it balanced. That was her answer. Like my presence was a problem of symmetry. Inside, the laughter was easy. Darlie's voice rang out first. She was holding court near the kitchen, doling out air kisses, compliments, and faux modesty as though she were hosting. They fawned over her for putting the decorations together. Handmade banners, flower arrangements, even themed coasters. It looked more like Darlie's event than Lyle's, but no one seemed to question it. Not even him. I took a small plate of fruit and slipped onto a seat at the patio edge, hoping to go unnoticed just long enough to collect myself. When Velda made her way out to greet some neighbors, I tried to join the circle, offering a comment about the lemon bars on the dessert table. Velda smiled vaguely, then shifted the topic. "Darlie really went all out. It's incredible, given what she's been through this year. That woman is a rock." Of course she was. Darlie always had a story that conveniently timed itself with anything I was about to say. I sat down again, back straighter this time. Lyle walked over, handed me a soda, then sat close. "You okay?" he asked under his breath. "I'm fine," I replied, then hesitated. "Did you notice my name's not on anything?" He didn't get a chance to respond. Velda stepped in, overhearing without apology. "Let it go, Maura. Darlie's still your elder. She's had to carry a lot more than you, and she's doing the best she can to hold this family together." I didn't say a word. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't trust myself to speak without saying too much. I walked inside a bit later to get water, needing a moment away from the noise. That's when I heard it. Darlie's voice, low but clear. "She means well. She just doesn't know how to be part of this family yet." I stood just behind the archway into the kitchen, unseen. She was talking to Velda's friend from church. The woman gave a polite chuckle and patted Darlie's shoulder, as if to say, "Bless her heart." I backed out slowly and returned to my seat like nothing happened. But everything inside me had shifted. My smile stayed fixed while I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the message threads with Velda. None of them mentioned my name. Not once. Every dinner invite, every birthday text, always addressed to Lyle and Guest. I stared at those words until they blurred. That night, as the sun dipped behind the evergreens, Velda stood up and tapped her glass. "Let's hear from some of our loved ones," she called. "But first, Darlie, would you do the honors?" Of course. Darlie glided up to the front of the crowd, wineglass lifted. "Before anyone says anything," she began, grinning, "I just want to say how proud I am to be here for Lyle. He deserves the world." I stood with my glass in hand, the words I had rehearsed all afternoon dissolving on my tongue. Darlie's voice carried through the backyard like it always did. Perfect pitch, calculated pauses, all the warmth of a practiced pageant queen. She talked about family being the backbone of everything, how life teaches you lessons when you least expect it, and then she landed the real punch, her miscarriage. "I was going to share this earlier," she said, her hand resting on her chest, "but I didn't want to make today about me. It's been 2 years since we lost our little one. I still light a candle every week, for healing, for hope." A few people murmured soft oh no's. One woman wiped her cheek. A man behind me whispered to his wife, "Did you know?" "I didn't know." Darlie smiled with perfect humility, like the suffering saint they all needed her to be. Meanwhile, I stood 2 steps from where I had just been ready to speak. My own words, my joy, our news, our moment, had been swallowed by a narrative no one dared to question. Lyle gave me a glance, as if to say, "Do you still want to?" I didn't answer. I nodded instead, mostly to myself, and stepped back into the crowd like I was never meant to stand out in the first place. After Darlie's toast, the music picked back up. Everyone returned to their drinks, to catching up, to laughing. Guests approached her one after another, offering words of support, some even apologizing for not knowing. She hugged them like they were old friends, as if the entire party was her living room, and the rest of us were her guests. I drifted toward the fruit table again. I didn't need more grapes. I needed distance. Lyle joined me a few minutes later, his expression soft but uncertain. He didn't touch his drink. "We can tell people later," he said. "Maybe over coffee, just us and your parents. Doesn't have to be a big announcement." He was trying to protect me. I knew that. But I also knew he had no idea what had just happened. "She knew," I said under my breath. "She timed it." He furrowed his brow, but didn't argue. The rest of the evening passed in fragments. People drifted in and out of conversations. Darlie never once looked my way, not even by accident. Velda made one more announcement about dessert and a photo slideshow put together by my amazing daughter, and I swallowed down whatever was left of my appetite. Back home, I folded the dress over the chair and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't even change. I just sat. Lyle was brushing his teeth in the bathroom, whistling a bit like he always did when he was trying to pretend the day had gone well. Then came the silence. Too long. I looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, phone in hand, a strange look on his face. "What?" I asked. He showed me the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. No name, no icon, just gray bubbles. "Don't be fooled. That baby might not be yours." That's it. No context. No signature. I took the phone slowly, scanning the punctuation, the spacing, the way the period sat alone at the end. I'd seen that rhythm before, on dozens of texts, and only one person in my life punctuated like that. "She sent this," I said, handing it back. "Maura, you don't know that." I didn't respond. "Weirdos are everywhere," he added. "Let's just block the number." "We will," I said, but I already knew I wouldn't forget it. Or delete it. I got up, pulled my laptop from the drawer, and opened the folder I'd labeled 2 months ago, but never touched again. Darlie pattern log. Inside, I had saved screenshots, random comments, timestamps of strange coincidences over the years, photos Darlie had liked and unliked on my social pages, texts she'd sent Lyle that ended with, "Don't tell Maura I asked. She'll think it's weird." Small things. Things no one would care about. But now they weren't isolated. Now they were patterns. I added a new note to the top. Party, March 24th. Pregnancy announcement blocked by staged miscarriage story. Unknown text message received that night. Likely her. Lyle climbed into bed beside me, already half asleep. I stared at the ceiling fan as it turned. She's not going to stop, I whispered to no one but myself. I moved the laptop closer and added one more note before closing the lid. Watch her more carefully. I didn't sleep much. My body was in bed, but my head stayed somewhere between Velda's dining table and the glow of my laptop. At some point after midnight, I shut the lid, left it on the nightstand, and slid under the blanket beside Lyle. He was already asleep, quiet, soft breathing, and I envied his ability to float above what had happened. By morning, the energy around the house was muted. Velda had planned a small family dinner to end the weekend, and nobody questioned it. I didn't either. It was her home, her event, her rules. At 6, the dining room was set like a magazine spread. Candles, polished silverware, floral napkin rings. Lyle and I arrived 5 minutes early, but Darlie was already seated across from where Velda had motioned for me to sit. Her smile was tighter than usual. I almost didn't recognize it as real. "Sit there," Velda said, pointing to the spot directly across from Darlie. "I figured you girls could use some time to reconnect." There it was again, her insistence on rewriting us into something we never were. We took our seats, conversations flowed, forks tapped plates, wine was poured. At some point during the second course, Darlie leaned forward and, in that syrupy tone she'd perfected, said, "Pregnancy's a wild ride, huh? Especially for someone like Maura. I mean, she's always been a little delicate." The comment hung in the air longer than it needed to. No one laughed. Not really. A few half-hearted chuckles, one cough. Then Velda, still buttering her roll, looked up and said with a breathy smile, "She's just joking. You know Darlie's sense of humor." Lyle said nothing. He kept eating. I stared at my salad, trying to remember the last time I'd felt like a full adult in that house. After dessert, I excused myself and walked out to the back patio. The air was colder than I expected, but I needed it. I needed something clean. Clear. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Nothing urgent. Just a reminder from my health app to log water intake. I opened it out of habit, checked a few tabs, then clicked into my patient portal. I noticed a login record I didn't recognize. 2 days before the party. The device ID wasn't mine, not Lyle's either. I checked his tablet, phone, even his work laptop later that evening. Nothing matched. And then, a sudden click in my head. Years ago, when Darlie thought she was pregnant, I helped her set up her first access to the same portal. She was nervous, didn't want to mess anything up. I'd logged in on my phone, let her browse, and never thought twice about it. She still had the credentials, or at least remembered how to get in. The access time matched the day before she brought up her miscarriage in that speech. It wasn't coincidence. It was prep work. After the dinner, we drove home mostly in silence. Lyle didn't ask why I hadn't said anything back at the table. Maybe he knew better. Or maybe he still thought this was just a personality clash between two sisters who needed space. When we got home, I poured myself a glass of water, took 2 slow sips, and opened my laptop again. The folder was waiting for me. Darlie pattern log. I added a new line. April 2nd. Unauthorized medical portal login. Likely Darlie. Motive. Sabotage. Manipulation of emotional tone at public event. I flipped through previous entries. The ones I had logged but never fully believed mattered. Gifts that didn't align with my dietary needs. Articles she sent Lyle about advanced maternal age. And the time she showed up uninvited to my first ultrasound appointment, saying she just happened to be nearby. I scrolled back up and added a header. Consistent undermining disguised as concern. I sat back in my chair and rubbed the side of my face. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't overthinking. It was structure. Later, lying in bed, I replayed the dinner in my mind. Darlie's tone, Velda's passive deflection, the way the others looked down at their plates, unwilling to challenge anything that might disturb the peace. They wouldn't see it. Not yet. They won't see it until she turns on them, I said aloud. I picked up my phone and took a screenshot of the login history. Then, I sent it to myself in an email labeled, "Just in case." Because if she crossed another line, I wanted it to be her last. After we got home, I watched Lyle hang up his jacket and disappear into the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. He asked if I wanted anything, and I told him no. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone still in hand, organizing the folder I had just finished uploading. Every detail, every digital breadcrumb, labeled and time-stamped. I wasn't scared, at least not in the way I used to be. It felt more like being inside a chess match I hadn't agreed to join, but now knew how to play. The next day passed in silence. No family texts, no follow-ups from Velda about the night before. Darlie, of course, posted 3 photos from the party, one of the cake, one with Velda in a side hug, and one of her standing alone near the gift table. No mention of me. Again. That evening, Velda invited us back for what she called a casual bite. I hesitated. Lyle said it might help normalize things. I said yes, but only because I needed to see her up close. We arrived a little past 5. The patio was set again with folding chairs, soft music, finger food laid out like always, shrimp cocktail, fruit skewers, and little spinach puffs I used to love before pregnancy made the smell unbearable. The sun dipped slowly over the fence, casting that long golden hour glow that made everything seem more peaceful than it deserved to be. Darlie approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She held a small plate, balanced carefully, like it was something important. "This one's for you," she said gently. "No garlic. I made sure this time." Her voice had that same rehearsed warmth, the same softness she used when telling Velda about her imaginary promotion last year. She placed the plate in my hands, patted my wrist. I didn't say much, just nodded and walked toward one of the folding tables, setting the plate down beside a half-empty glass of lemonade I hadn't touched. I didn't eat. I didn't plan to. From across the yard, I caught her watching me. Her glance wasn't long, just enough to check if the plate had moved. I looked away before she saw that I saw. "Velda called everyone to gather for a photo. Just a quick shot before it gets too dark," she said. I left the plate exactly where it sat, untouched. After the flash, I wandered back to my table. It was gone. I scanned the tables, the chairs, the counter by the kitchen. Nowhere. So I slipped inside, took the hallway toward the kitchen. There, next to the sink, was a trash bag not fully tied. The plate was in it, wrapped in a new napkin, completely untouched. Someone had taken it and tossed it. I didn't need to ask who. On the drive home, Lyle talked about Velda's garden, how he was impressed she managed to keep the succulents alive after that frost last month. I nodded occasionally, giving him space to talk while my mind rolled back over the timeline. When we got home, I asked Lyle casually, "Hey, can you check the backyard camera for a sec? I thought I saw something weird last night." He was in the middle of taking off his shoes, but shrugged and grabbed the tablet. A few taps later, he frowned. "That's weird. The footage from 5:42 to 5:59 is just blank, like static." I didn't react right away. I already knew what he'd find. That window was exactly when Darlie had handed me the plate. I made a new entry in my log. April 3rd, power flicker aligned with food delivery. Camera gap, 17 minutes. Darlie, present. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it like a technician checking a circuit. This was no longer emotional. It was procedural. At bedtime, while Lyle brushed his teeth and flipped through the news on his phone, I sat on my side of the bed and uploaded a new batch of photos and notes to the cloud. I labeled the new folder, "Just in case. Truth always surfaces." I had just closed my laptop when Lyle came in and sat next to me, rubbing his face. "I think your mom meant well tonight," he said. I looked at him, then looked back at my phone. I didn't answer. Instead, I tapped through my photos, checked that everything was backed up, and then turned off the screen. Because tomorrow would come, and I had a feeling someone else was about to pay the price for a plate that never should have been served. The next morning came like any other. Quiet, gray, still. Lyle had already left to pick up bagels for Velda's follow-up brunch, some awkward attempt at a family cool-down. I stayed back to finish my tea and give myself a moment. I kept thinking about the plate Darlie had handed me the night before. The way she looked at it, the way it vanished, and how none of it sat right, not even in my stomach. By noon, we were back at Velda's backyard. It was almost identical to the party setup: folding chairs, plastic tablecloths, trays of food under mesh covers. But there was something off in the air, like the party smiles from last night were now painted on and drying too fast in the sun. I kept my distance from the buffet. I knew Velda would notice, so I made sure to carry a glass of water and a napkin just to keep my hands busy. It didn't take long before Darlie approached, once again holding a plate. Another special one. "Hey," she said casually. "I made sure this one's safe. No garlic, no citrus, all good." She said it with such ease, as if last night had never happened. "I'm not hungry," I replied, flat. "Oh, I get it. Pregnancy waves, right?" She smiled, leaned in. "But don't let this go to waste. Ronan'll eat anything." And just like that, she turned, held the plate out toward her husband across the lawn, and called out, "Try this one, babe." Ronan looked up, wiped his hands on a napkin, and took it from her with a tired grin. "What's in it?" he asked, already lifting the fork. "Just lasagna," she said, voice soft. "The one Maura didn't want." He didn't pause, just started eating like it was nothing. I stood completely still, hand frozen around my glass. The words, "the one Maura didn't want," bounced around my head like a ball in an empty room. 10 minutes passed. Then came the shift. Ronan staggered forward, hand clutched at his side. His face went pale, lips almost bluish. At first, I thought maybe it was the heat, but then I saw him bend forward, violent retching onto the grass. Velda screamed, "Call someone! Call 911!" Lyle ran over, trying to hold Ronan upright. He was shaking now, sweating through his shirt, gasping between gags. Darlie fell beside him, wailing, "What's happening? What's wrong with him?" She looked around wildly, like she didn't know who to blame. I didn't move. I stayed by the edge of the patio, staring. Because I knew exactly what he had eaten. It was the plate meant for me. But I said nothing. Not yet. The ambulance came quicker than expected. Maybe because Velda had called someone higher up at the clinic she volunteers at, or maybe it was just luck. They loaded Ronan into the back, and Darlie cried the whole time, fingers trembling, voice shaking. Velda rode with Lyle in the car behind the ambulance. I stayed. Darlie was still on the porch when everyone else had cleared. Her mascara had streaked, her cheeks blotchy. She held a tissue to her mouth like it was keeping her together. When our eyes finally met, she didn't say anything at first. Then, quietly, "What did you give him?" It hit me like a slap. I walked closer, slow, deliberate. "I didn't touch anything. That plate? You gave it to me. I left it. He picked it up when I didn't." She didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at me like I had upended her entire script. "No one's going to believe that," she said finally, barely audible. "Maybe not," I said. "But the camera won't lie." "Oh, wait. Never mind. It glitched again, didn't it?" Her lip twitched, just a little. "Be careful," she murmured, more like a warning to herself than a threat to me. That night, back in my office, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat with my laptop and renamed the folder. Darlie Pattern Log, Active Attempt, Document Everything. I rewrote the timeline, from the message to the missing footage, from the untouched plate to the person who ended up in the ER. I closed the file and leaned back. "I was supposed to be the one in that ambulance," I whispered. Then I added one last note. She didn't panic because someone got hurt. She panicked because it wasn't me. The morning after Ronan was taken to the hospital, The sky hung low and quiet. There was no breeze, no birdsong, just that suffocating stillness that comes after something breaks but hasn't yet fallen apart completely. I had just poured my second cup of coffee when Lyle walked into the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger, signaling I should wait. I leaned against the counter. "She wants us over at 2, he said after hanging up. "Family meeting." "Velda?" I asked. He nodded. "She says it's about what happened yesterday." Of course it was. I didn't ask who else was invited. I already knew Darlie would be there. She wouldn't miss a stage, not one like this. And Velda wouldn't dare hold court without her star pupil sitting front and center. By 1:40, we were pulling up to the house again. The same house where Darlie's voice echoed like wallpaper. The same porch where she cried crocodile tears less than 24 hours ago. Velda greeted us at the door like nothing had happened. Her tone was calm but clipped. I scanned the room. Ronan wasn't there, of course, still in recovery. But Darlie was. She sat on the edge of the couch, wearing light blue with sleeves that fluttered like she'd just stepped off a yoga retreat. Her eyes were red. Mascara had been reapplied. Her hair pulled back with 2 gentle strands loose at the sides. Grief costume, complete. As soon as we sat down, she spoke. No one prompted her. "I almost lost my husband," she said, her voice breaking just enough. "I don't know how this happened, how food at our own party could do that. I can't sleep thinking about it." Not once did she say Ronan's name. Not once did she say she was sorry. I watched the way Velda nodded along. Arms crossed, but not defensive. More protective. No one said my name either, but the tension in the room had it circling like smoke. I let her talk. Let the performance unfold, line by line, like a script she'd memorized and tested in front of a mirror. And then I spoke. The plate Ronan ate from was meant for me. Velda's mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. "I didn't eat it. He picked it up after I left it behind." Darlie looked right at me. Her face didn't falter, but her hands trembled just slightly, enough to catch the light. "So now I'm being accused?" she said, voice rising. "After everything I've done for this family? For you?" Velda shifted in her seat, preparing to intervene, but Lyle beat her to it. "It's a valid question, Mom," he said firmly. Silence. I felt the axis of the room turn. Not much, but just enough. And then, from the side of the room, a voice I didn't expect. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but I think I have to." It was Inez, the catering assistant, Velda's neighbor's niece. She'd been quiet this whole time, sitting in a side chair, scrolling on her phone. I had barely noticed her. Inez looked up, meeting Velda's eyes first, then Darlie's, then mine. When we were setting up the trays, Mrs. Darlie asked me not to serve one of the dishes. She said it was for her sister. Just for her. That no one else should touch it. Velda stiffened. Darlie's face drained. Just a little. I kept my gaze steady, didn't flinch. No one yelled, no one screamed. There wasn't a dramatic collapse or wailing denial. Just silence. Long and brittle. It was the kind of silence you only hear when something false starts to fall apart. Darlie opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Velda finally stood up, smoothing the sides of her blouse. "I think that's enough for now," she said. "Thank you, Inez." We all began to rise. Darlie didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. When Lyle and I got back in the car, he didn't turn the ignition right away. He stared straight ahead and finally said, "Do you think she did it on purpose?" I looked out the window for a long time before I replied. "I think she wanted to hurt me," I said. "She just didn't care who paid the price." That night, while Lyle slept, I opened the active attempt folder on my laptop and created a new subfolder. Next. Proof. Because now it wasn't just about me, and the next proof would come from a place she didn't know was watching her. The next morning, I was halfway through my first coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from Janelle, our neighbor. She lived 2 doors down, the kind of neighbor who always had eyes on the street, but never overstepped. Her message was short. "Hey Maura, weird question. Do you want the security footage from Saturday night? Our camera points over your fence. Motion got triggered a few times. Thought you might want to look." I sat back in my chair, my mug still in my hand. My heart didn't race, but something deeper inside shifted. I replied, kept it light. "Sure, appreciate it." A few minutes later, she sent me a short video clip and a message. Might be nothing, but figured I'd offer. I downloaded it, plugged in my headphones, and hit play. At first, it was just grainy backyard footage. The corner of our fence, a slice of Velda's patio visible through a break in the trees. It was twilight. The catering tables had just been set. People mingled in and out of frame until I saw her. Darlie. She crouched behind the table, almost blocked from view. Her purse was tucked between 2 food warmers. I watched her look around, pull something small and shiny from her bag, and reach toward one of the trays. The movement was quick, practiced. Then she stood, brushed her hands on her dress, and walked back into the frame like nothing had happened. I paused it. My hand gripped the side of the laptop. I took a screenshot and saved it. That night, after dinner, I sat Lyle down at the table. I pulled out the laptop and said only one word. Watch. He did. In silence. When the clip ended, he didn't ask questions. He didn't try to rationalize it or tell me it might not mean what I thought. He just said, "She knew that wasn't for Ronan. She just didn't stop him." I nodded, already saving the clip into my folder. I renamed it, Exhibit 1, External Source. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't even suspicion. This was visible. The next morning, I texted Velda, asking if I could check in on Ronan. She responded within minutes. "He's still weak, but he asked for you." It surprised me. I hadn't expected him to ask for me. That afternoon, I stopped by the hospital. I brought a box of chamomile tea bags, the kind he liked. Velda had just stepped out for a coffee break, so it was just us. He looked older in the bed, not sick, but smaller somehow, like his body had let go of whatever illusion it had been trying to maintain. "Hey," he said softly, "I didn't think you'd come." I sat down in the chair beside him. "You asked for me." He smiled faintly. We were quiet for a few minutes. I unpacked the tea and placed it on the table. Then he said, "Can I tell you something? I haven't told anyone." I nodded. "Before I passed out," he said slowly, "she bent over me. She didn't think I was listening. She said, 'It wasn't supposed to be you.'" His voice cracked a little. "And she looked terrified. Not because I was hurt, because she messed it up." I stayed quiet. Let him finish. "She sounded like someone who'd just broken her own rules." "Did anyone else hear?" I asked. He shook his head. "Just me." I touched his hand briefly. "That's enough." Later that night, back at home, I opened my laptop and began putting it all together. Not as notes this time, but as a structured file, a digital presentation. A single document with everything. Exhibit 1, Janelle's camera footage. Exhibit 2, medical portal login logs. Exhibit 3, Inez's statement. Exhibit 4, Ronan's words, typed as he said them, with time, date, and witness listed as me. I uploaded everything into a shared folder and sent it privately to my friend Jenna, who happened to be a family lawyer in Lane County. No drama, no caption, just the link and one sentence. "Please keep this safe." My final act of the evening was drafting a group message to the family. "We need a meeting. Everyone. No exceptions. There's something you all need to see." I didn't send it right away. I stared at it for a while. Then, I added a title to the top of the document, "The Truth You Ignored." And I clicked send. Because when you finally show the truth, it has to be in front of everyone who looked away. I stood in the hallway, just outside the living room, while the digital projector warmed up. The low whir of the fan inside it matched the sound in my chest. Steady, focused, no panic left. Through the doorway, I could see Lyle setting out glasses of water on the coffee table. Ronan leaning against the armrest of the couch, still pale but alert. The others hadn't arrived yet, but they would. I checked the time, 5:58 p.m. One by one they filed in. Velda first, of course. Her silver hair was pinned up higher than usual, and she carried a Tupperware container of lemon cookies like that would sweeten whatever was coming. Then Darlie entered. Alone. She wore beige, no jewelry, no dramatic makeup this time. Just soft tones and wary eyes, like a woman attending her own sentencing without knowing what the charge was yet. At exactly 6, I stepped into the room. "Thanks for coming," I said. "Please have a seat." No one spoke. I walked to the front of the room and stood beside the screen. It projected the title I had typed the night before in large, bold letters. "The Truth You Ignored." "This won't take long," I began, "but it will be clear." I clicked the remote. First slide, Inez's signed statement. Her words, typed and time-stamped, next to a photo of her at the catering station. "She told me not to let anyone touch that tray," the quote read. "Said it was just for her sister." Next slide, medical portal access logs. Highlighted lines showed access from an unregistered device days before the incident. Dates, times, IP addresses. Third slide, the grainy footage from Janelle's camera. Darlie crouched behind the food tables, hand in her purse. Reaching. Lyle stared at the screen. Velda shifted in her chair. Darlie didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed glued to the wall behind me, unfocused. Then came Ronan's quote, typed in the center of a white background. "It wasn't supposed to be you." Silence followed. And finally, I opened the last file. A PDF. Hospital records. Toxicology results from Ronan's blood work. Listed clearly among the agents detected. A compound known to induce uterine contractions. Dangerous for early pregnancies, especially those marked high risk in medical files. Velda placed her hand over her mouth. Lyle looked down at his lap, clenched fists resting on his knees. Ronan didn't blink. He watched Darlie. And she finally spoke. "It wasn't meant to hurt anyone," she said quietly. "It was just to scare her, to get her to think." She stood up, voice rising with every word. "You all treat her like she's this perfect, innocent thing. Like she didn't come in here and take over everything. I was here first. I've carried this family. I planned every birthday, every baby shower, every holiday. And what does she get? A banner? A baby? All the attention." "You tried to poison your sister," Lyle said, his voice like gravel. "This isn't about attention anymore." Darlie's hands trembled. "It was one time, one thing. It went too far. But Ronan, he wasn't supposed to." "You didn't mean for me to eat it," Ronan cut in, voice flat. "But you meant for someone to." That landed hard. Velda finally stood. "Stop talking, Darlie," she said. "Just stop." "No," I said calmly. "Let her say it. Let them all hear." And Darlie broke. Not the theatrical, mascara-smudged crying she had perfected over the years, but the kind of unraveling that doesn't come with noise. Her shoulders slumped. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came. She sat back down. I stepped forward, took a breath. "I've already sent everything to the police," I said, scanning each face. "There's nothing more to discuss here. What happens next isn't mine to decide." Then I turned to Velda, the woman who had smiled through every slight, the one who excused every insult from Darlie with a chuckle and the same tired line. "She's your sister." "I'm not asking you to pick sides," I said, "but I am telling you where I stand." And for the first time in years, no one interrupted me when I finished speaking. 2 weeks later, I sat in the back row of courtroom 3B, hands folded in my lap, the smell of stale coffee and paper filling the space around us. Lyle was beside me, silent, his thumb brushing mine like a quiet metronome. Across the aisle, Ronan sat at the plaintiff's table, still pale, still recovering, but upright and present. Beside him was his attorney. On the opposite side, Darlie sat with a public defender she hadn't spoken 2 words to since she walked in. She looked smaller in the courtroom light. Not physically, she still had that straight posture and tight jaw, but smaller in presence. She didn't command the room anymore, not like she used to. The judge, a tall woman with clipped sentences and zero tolerance for dramatics, cleared her throat and began. This is case number 2371C, Ronan Fields versus Darlie Fields. Petitioner seeks immediate dissolution of marriage on grounds of endangerment. There were no objections, no counter-arguments, just a nod from Darlie's lawyer and a hushed, "We accept." No fireworks, no gasps, just quiet, just truth. Finally, in a space where no one could talk over it. Outside the courtroom, Velda stood by the water fountain, wiping her face with the corner of a tissue she'd shredded over the past hour. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. I didn't offer comfort, not out of bitterness, just certainty. The kind of certainty that no longer needs to explain itself. The sentencing came 2 days later. Darlie wouldn't serve prison time. The DA didn't file attempted murder. Too hard to prove intent with enough certainty. But reckless endangerment, tampering with food, emotional cruelty with corroborated witness statements, those stuck. The judge gave her 18 months in a local correctional center, 3 years of probation, and mandatory psychological evaluation sessions. Twice a week, minimum. People in our neighborhood whispered. Some said it was harsh. Others said it wasn't enough. I said nothing. The week after sentencing, Velda dropped off a bundle of baby clothes on our porch. No note. Just a grocery bag tied in a loose knot, with a pair of tiny white booties sitting right on top. I left it there until the morning rain came and soaked through the paper tags. Then I brought it in and put it in a bin we'd already filled from our own shopping. A month later, I was standing in the nursery, holding my daughter against my chest. Her breathing was soft, rhythmic, her skin warm and perfect against mine. Lyle came in quietly, holding a photo frame. "Thought you'd want this on the dresser," he said, setting it down. It was the 3 of us, him, me, and Nate. No grandparents, no aunts, just us. Nate peeked into the room a few minutes later, holding something in his hand, a small paper star cut from a cereal box. "I made this for her," he said, "so she always knows someone's looking out for her." I kissed the top of his head, took the star, and gently tucked it next to the baby's blanket. It didn't erase the past, but it did remind me that the past didn't get to run things anymore. Sometimes healing doesn't come with fanfare. Sometimes it's just a quiet morning, a steady breath, and a choice to stay. Weeks passed. The house stayed quiet. We kept our circle small. I answered questions when friends asked, but never gave more than I needed to. Then, one afternoon, I saw Velda standing across the street. She wasn't walking her dog or bringing in groceries. She was just standing, looking. She noticed me through the window. We didn't wave. We didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. That was enough. Later that evening, Lyle came into the living room with his phone in hand. "Ronan sent a message," he said. "He asked me to tell you thank you for not staying silent." I nodded. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table, tea cooling beside me, I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder. Not to edit it, not to add more evidence, just to remind myself I hadn't imagined any of it. It all happened, and I stood up anyway. I'm not angry anymore, but I'll never be naive again, because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence that finally stays quiet because it no longer needs to explain itself. Sometimes surviving is the quietest way to win.